5 Live Formula One.
Well, qualifying is out the way and wrapped up, which means that attention is thrown to the race tomorrow, and what a race we have in front of us. But before that, let's go over everything that has happened so far this weekend. I'm Kai Bacini, and alongside me, ex-McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley is going to join me for our overall thoughts of what has happened so far. It's going to be a full British lockout of the front row once again, with a pole position from Lando Norris, George Russell alongside him, and Kimi Antonelli completing the top three. It's been a bit of a strange day, hasn't it, Mark? There's been a lot of factors that have had to be thrown into the equation.
It's been a busy day, as it always is on a sprint weekend, because you go straight into that competitive session, the sprint earlier on. Look, the weekend so far, and particularly today, has been dominated by this ever-present threat of rain.
Yeah.
And in the sprint, we know it came about a lap too late, and it really did. It was a torrential downpour, but just after the checkered flag. I mean, imagine if that had come 5 minutes earlier. That would have put the cat amongst the pigeons at the end of that particular part of the weekend. And then again in qualifying, the same sort of thing. It was a threat of rain for the last 5 minutes. Everybody went out early to set those laps while they thought the track was at its best, and the rain never really quite materialised. So it's been one of those who've been hanging on for it. Everyone's been building strategy around it, and as it turned out, everyone was back in the garage and getting out of their cars with 30 seconds still left on the clock.
I mean, it's just so typical of Zandvoort, isn't it? Everyone's waiting for the downpour of rain to hit the circuit, but it never really comes, and it might do tomorrow. We'll have to wait and see if that's one of the issues that the drivers have to face, one of the spanners that's thrown into the work. But for the moment, this is going to be the last Zandvoort Grand Prix that we're going to have of the modern era after it was reintroduced to the calendar in 2021. For the first time at Zandvoort, we had a sprint race weekend. We briefly mentioned it just before, but your sprint race winner, drum roll, it was George Russell. It was a great race from George Russell and a much-needed bounce back of confidence coming off the back of the summer break. When we heard from him after Spa-Francorchamps has to be the highlight in my head, he just seemed so lost in the car, so down and not confident in his own ability. But has that all changed after today?
Well, he's certainly done the right thing so far. I mean, it won't have changed that quickly, but I think you could have asked much more from him so far in the weekend, really. That sprint was important, I think, for exactly that reason. The 8 points that come with that victory are valuable, and they could be really valuable come the end of the season. But I think the bigger impact is exactly what you said. It's coming back after the summer break, a little bit of gap from Formula One to sort of detach yourself from all of that, what must have felt to him like negativity before we got to the summer break after the Hungaroring, where his teammate was just dominating proceedings across that, across Formula One, but particularly across that battle, across the Mercedes garage. So he needed the break perhaps more than anyone else in this sport. Looks like he's had a good one, got engaged to his longtime girlfriend, and he's been fully relaxed and come back and done everything very well so far. So getting the sprint pole, taking the victory in the sprint, brilliant stuff. Then, of course, we move into the more regular part of the weekend. It's qualifying that happened today, and then a Grand Prix that happens tomorrow where the most of the points are handed out. That's where he's got to continue that form.
And I think that was one of the main issues for George Russell, is he was getting in his own head about it. Maybe the media had a little bit of a influence on that, as well as obviously Russell coming into the season was the championship favourite. Yes, he had this very talented youngster alongside him who's shown flashes of pace in 2025 campaign, did Antonelli. But I don't think anyone really expected Antonelli to come out of the gates in the first half of this season as he did and win those 5 races in a row. From that, each race victory that Antonelli's been picking up, that's just been eating away at the mind of George Russell.
Yeah, and I think you can look at each of those race victories and say they were quite dominant. It wasn't like he just pipped George to the line in most of those. He dominated a lot of those weekends, and that's the thing that will have eaten away at George Russell. The couple of races that George did get the victory, you could almost argue, if you're a Kimi Antonelli fan, that there were mitigating circumstances against that. Perhaps not the first one, but there were a couple of occasions when reliability favoured one or the other. You could argue George has had a bit more bad luck than perhaps Kimi has, and that's true. But you will also also say that the better of the two drivers, and this is what will hurt him, the better of the two drivers was undoubtedly Kimi in the first half of this season.
You can't really disagree with it. We'll get back to George Russell in just a moment, but we need to talk about our pole man, Lando Norris. McLaren back on brilliant form and doing what they do best. It's back-to-back pole positions. Yes, the races were 4 weeks apart, but nothing's really changed. Let's hear from what Lando Norris had to say after qualifying.
Yeah. Lando, congratulations. Fastest in Q2, fastest in both runs in Q3. That's the good kind of consistency. You must be pleased.
It was certainly a little bit better than, I wouldn't say better than I was expecting. We could have been pole yesterday in qualifying, so it wasn't like we were shocking yesterday and amazing today. I think the sprint race this morning disappointed me quite a bit because of our pace and our struggles. I knew we would be a little bit better come qualifying again because we're low fuel, new tyres. And especially just my final two laps. I put things together a lot more, and especially my final one was certainly not my best lap I've ever done. It was not my cleanest lap I've ever done. But I committed everywhere a lot more with my braking. I took a lot more risks in all the high-speed corners, so it was like a lap that was a lot more uncomfortable. One where I was just hustling and sliding a lot more and reacting a lot more to the car, which is not normally the best way to go about in qualifying, but it worked today. So I did what I needed to, and I'm very happy with that.
How are you feeling about tomorrow, given what you learned about what the car is like on a longer run this morning?
I'm not thinking of tomorrow, I'm just thinking of I'm on pole. Just let me enjoy it. I'll enjoy it. I'll do my preparation with my guys and the girls tonight. Prepare well, learn as much as we can from this morning, see what we can do better, see what kind of compromises I can maybe make between high speed and slow speed, and see how we can make our weaknesses not as much of a struggle. But tonight we just need to work hard, and if we work hard and we prepare well, I think it's certainly possible. But I'm not expecting a race quite like Budapest. I'm expecting a bit more of a challenge, so it's going to be a tough race, but I look forward to it.
Good luck for it.
Thanks very much.
That was Lawrence Barretto speaking with your pole sitter. An impressive result from Lando Norris. But Mark, quite how impressed are you with him today?
Yeah, he's done a really good job in qualifying, and I think what you can pick up from that interview is when he says he's not thinking about tomorrow, he just wants to enjoy right now. I think it's probably fair to say that's because tomorrow is highly likely to be a lot more difficult for him. I think what we saw in the sprint earlier on today was that McLaren was a bit of a handful. He struggled to keep back the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc for most of that race, eventually losing out to him. And it really wasn't a car that seemed like it was managing its tyres well over the longer stint of a sprint, particularly when loaded up with fuel. So I think when it comes to the Grand Prix tomorrow, in these temperatures, which are a lot cooler than they were in Budapest, the circuit has a lot of similarities to Budapest, but the temperatures and the conditions are really quite different. And I think McLaren know that they are going to find it a little bit harder. So he's done the work today. He's done exactly what he needed to do to give himself the best shot. But I think he's going to spend a lot of time looking in his mirrors tomorrow.
Overall, McLaren have been so strong at this circuit notoriously. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, both the teammates, have taken a victory in the past at this circuit. Having that past experience, yes, it's a new era, a new generation of cars, but is that going to work in his favour going into the race tomorrow?
Well, look, it can do, for sure. You can take confidence from the fact that you know how to do it. You've done it before, you know how to win. And that's not just the drivers, that's everybody on the team, the pit wall, the strategists. Everybody will take things from those successful moments, that's for sure. But this is a different ball game slightly this year. It's brand new technology, complete reset of the rules and the cars. And look, the McLaren has strengths and it has weaknesses like every other car. He's exploited all of those strengths in qualifying. Over that single lap on the soft tyres, he was able to get the most out of it, better than anyone else today. I think when it comes to race conditions with a heavier car, probably on slightly harder tyres, and in these, like I said, these cooler, slightly mixed conditions, that is, I think, where one of the weaknesses of McLaren come in. They love the high-speed stuff, really good through a lot of those sections of racetracks. There are not many of those around this particular circuit.
But Norris isn't going to have the easiest run down into Turn 1. Yes, he'll have the shortest line to the apex of Tarzan, but he has both the Mercedes behind him, George Russell alongside him, and Kimi Antonelli behind. We heard from them after quali.
George, consistent again. I know it wasn't pole, but to get another front row start and kind of put yourself in the mix, that must be really good again for your confidence.
Yeah, it feels good. It feels good to be back driving. It's a real pleasure driving this circuit. It requires a lot of commitment. The laps were strong. I felt a bit more myself again, and the potential was there for pole. A small mistake on a bump through turn 8, but nevertheless it was strong performance.
Obviously in the sprint, and I know it's only a small sector, McLaren looked like they struggled a little bit more. Does that give you hope you can go after the victory tomorrow, what pace you've got?
Yeah, I think that they're very fast in the high speed corners, and I don't think that will give them as much of an opportunity to utilise that pace as it does in qualifying, because it just puts too much temperature in the tyres. So I hope that is the same tomorrow. Nevertheless, if you're on pole, it's always the best place to start, especially on a circuit where it's difficult to overtake.
Kimi, it looked like a smoother session, at least in quali today, and not far off pole. What's your kind of read of how it all unfolded?
Yeah, I mean, 1/10 of pole it hurts a little bit because I had a really bad sector 1 in my last lap, so obviously when you see that in the lap is never promising, you know, and is never a good feeling when you see that you're 2/10 down in sector 1, but still was able to make it up in sector 2, sector 3, but still not good enough performance wise, because I think we had a real shot for today for the pole, especially in Q3, but sometimes it goes like this, and the most important is that we come back stronger from that.
Do you fancy your chances, yours and the team, of taking the fight to McLaren tomorrow in terms of race pace?
Yeah, I think the race pace is stronger than our quali pace, so hopefully tomorrow we can put a fight. Of course, Lando and George did a great job, and they're feeling great this weekend, so yeah, it's not going to be easy, but we're ready to give our best.
Well, good luck tomorrow. Thanks, Kimi.
I mean, look, I think those two drivers are both sitting there this evening on Saturday night, smelling a real opportunity to take this race victory. In fact, I'd go even further, and I'd say if one of those two doesn't take the race victory, they'll be massively disappointed, because you heard George Russell just saying there, McLaren are not that strong in the race. We don't think, comparatively to qualifying. It's what I said earlier on. I think it's going to be the case, but they are. They have really strong race pace. Particularly, I think, Kimi Antonelli. You know, George Russell, we've been talking about him all weekend. He's done a really solid job coming back from that summer break. He's ticked almost every box now. Sprint pole, he's won the sprint, put himself on the front row for the Grand Prix. But there was an interview that was done with Kimi Antonelli when he stepped out of the car, and he referenced it just then. He thinks he lost 2/10 in the very first corner of that flying lap. 2/10 would have put him on pole quite clearly.
Yeah.
Now, if you're George Russell and you're hearing that, there's going to be a worry here. Kimi Antonelli, traditionally this season, has been the stronger of the two Mercedes drivers, by quite some margin when it comes to Sunday, when it comes to race day. So George, yes, he's done a great job. He's got to really come out the blocks flying tomorrow, because he knows that young kid behind him, he will do almost anything to get to the front, and he's certainly got a car to do it.
Well, nothing's really changed over the summer break. Obviously, none of the teams were allowed to change anything on the cars, weren't allowed to be in the factory to develop anything. So almost the cars are in the same position of what we saw in Hungary and what we saw from the first half of the season as well. We know that the Mercedes is so much stronger over that long race distance, and Antonelli as a driver is so much stronger than George in that long race distance. Antonelli, in qualifying, which he's continued on today, hasn't started outside of the front two rows. He's qualified inside the top 4 for every single Grand Prix race, and he continues on with that stint to put himself in a great position.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And one of the other things that he has to do very well this weekend is maximise whatever he thinks he can achieve. He's got to get the best out of this one, because that stat you just rattled off there is about to come to an end, because when we get to Monza, next race out, Toto Wolff already suggesting today that Kimi's going to take engine penalties and a grid penalty to go with it, because they're going to run out of components. They've had reliability issues. He's going to bring a new component to Monza, because that's one of the opportunities where you can really make up places with a strong power unit, even if you do take a grid penalty. So knowing that that's coming, you've got to maximise every single opportunity that comes your way. And this weekend here in Zandvoort, that's one of those opportunities, because they've got a car capable of winning this race.
Well, does he have a chance of winning in front of his home crowd with those issues coming into mind? That's something that Antonelli and Wolf will have to think about from the team standpoint as well. And that's actually the point that I was going to make, Mark. Being McLaren and being either Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri is starting on that second row as well. First and fourth for the two of them. They may not be as quick in the race pace, but we know that McLaren car is consistent and you can rely on that car. For Mercedes, both drivers have been at the short end of the stick of reliability issues. Now, if you're a McLaren driver, do you get some sort of confidence boost from that? Does that play in the back of your mind that you're not too worried about them too much because of that factor?
It's one of those things. It's a bit of a fingers crossed strategy, though, isn't it? I think, every Formula One team and driver, you can only really control what you can control. That's your performance, that's your car and technology, it's your strategy from the pit wall, all those things. Relying on the fact that someone else might come to, have some sort of failure is a bit of a hit and hope. So I think, look, McLaren are going to struggle in relation to the performance they had today. That doesn't mean they're going to really struggle and tumble down the order. It just means they're going to have a difficult challenge on their hands to dominate like they have in qualifying today. So Piastri, being in fourth, has got at least two cars, probably three cars that are genuinely quicker than him ahead of him. His biggest worry is going to be keeping the guys behind, because he's got Ferraris behind him who, they struggled in qualifying, but I think in perhaps the opposite to McLaren, when it comes to race day, I suspect Ferrari might be in slightly better shape than McLaren. So he's going to have his mirrors full of a seven-time world champion desperate to get past.
Well, you say about Piastri worrying about the Ferraris behind him, but with the two McLaren drivers being split in comparison to the two Mercedes that start second and third, Russell and Antonelli, both the Ferraris start fifth and sixth alongside each other, and both of the Red Bulls start alongside each other. So tactically, there can be a lot at play here. What do the teams do? Where do they poise the drivers? We've already seen split strategies in the sprint race earlier on between the two Ferraris, where Leclerc went on the softs and Hamilton went on the mediums. But for Piastri, does he go for maybe a more maybe a more aggressive strategy to attack the back of the Mercedes and try and get that buffer to allow Lando Norris to disappear out in front?
Well, in many teams, you'd say that would be a really strong play, but McLaren have traditionally sort of taken this view that they really don't want to disadvantage one driver over the other. Perhaps that's less of an issue now, given that they're not really fighting for a world title at this point in the season, but they typically like to give both of their drivers equal opportunities. So I think more the strategic play comes when you've got two cars together in the fight, because you're able to use one or the other to hold up a group, to build a tyre window, or a pit window rather, to make your pit stop into, if that should be the case. I think we're also got a very high risk of safety cars around here. It's a very narrow circuit. Cars can get stuck in gravel traps where they need to be recovered with cranes and off-circuit vehicles. We've seen that in some of the support races already this weekend. So there's a reasonable chance that this race will get at some point neutralised by safety cars or virtual safety cars. And that's really where the teams on the pit wall have got to be super reactive and play the strategy card to their advantage. So it's a difficult one to call. All the data points towards a two-stop race being the best way, the fastest way around here, but it's quite close with a one-stop. And given that you find it hard to overtake around here and get past cars, track position's key. So you might find, as long as tyre wear is not disastrous in the early phase of the race, you might find some people pushing towards a one-stop just so that they don't drop back into the field and have to fight their way back through.
Well, we're talking about strategy between the teams. Ferrari, one of the teams that we mentioned, lock out the third row on the grid here, fifth and sixth. Once again, not the strongest qualifying session from Ferrari as a team, but they seemingly haven't needed that in the first half of the season. Ferrari second in the constructors' standings at the moment. Lewis Hamilton second in the drivers' standings, 53 points behind Antonelli, and Leclerc finding himself tucked in fourth as well. 9 race podiums between the two of them and 2 race wins as well. Ferrari, I think it's fair to say, they've been there or thereabouts. They've been slowly chipping it away, collecting points under their belt, but not quite putting on stellar performances. Nothing really explosive coming from the Ferrari garage, but still doing enough to be competitive.
Yeah, and I think, if you took Mercedes out of the picture, Ferrari have had a really good season. Unfortunately, Mercedes are in the picture and they've had a better one. And that's their biggest problem, because this has been a pretty decent season for Ferrari. If you compare it to recent years, they've come out the blocks with a pretty good car. They've had a number of really good strategy calls, and we haven't been able to say that for some time. They've got 2 drivers now rather than just one who seem very comfortable in that car. Everything's sort of coming together for Ferrari. They're just not quite across the line. And Mercedes have built up a really strong lead in the early part of the season when they capitalised on the new rules and regulations, the new technology, better than anyone else did. So while everyone else was squabbling amongst themselves, trying to figure it all out, Mercedes were already up and running. That's where the advantages come. So consequently, that's the disadvantage Ferrari now have. But I think looking ahead to tomorrow's race, I think Lewis Hamilton, after the qualifying session, seemed pretty confident actually in himself, in that although it's only 5th and he'd love to be much higher, he actually feels confident that he's got a car that he's reasonably comfortable with. In race conditions, he thinks that car will be better than it was today in qualifying.
And I completely agree with what he said there. We know the Ferraris are hot chargers off the line. They're really good off the marks for the starts, and that's going to suit them really well at this Zandvoort circuit. We've said time and time again that your best opportunity to make up positions is going to be the opening stages of this race, the first few corners down into turn 1. That is where Leclerc and Hamilton can make a change.
Yeah, 100%. The difficulty, I guess, is because they're a little bit further back in the pack. 5th and 6th is right in the middle of it. So when you get down into turn 1, you want to be where Lando Norris is. You want to be where George Russell is, clear of the chasing pack. The 2 Ferraris stuck right in the thick of it all.
But you say that both of the Mercedes drivers in this season really haven't been good off the line. So that opens the door for McLaren and that opens the door for Ferrari.
Yeah, 100%. We said it's all about the start tomorrow, the early phase, and what will determine then your race strategy for the rest of the Grand Prix is how you get off the line. So yes, Ferrari typically very, very good. Others have caught up. McLaren now, good starters. Mercedes, it has been a bit of an Achilles heel. So all eyes on all of them come the lights going out tomorrow.
Well, if we go one more row back, we find our 2 Red Bull drivers. Liam Lawson, yes, you're not going crazy. He's normally in the Racing Bulls car, but he's in the 2nd Red Bull seat for this weekend alongside home hero, who's normally very strong around this track. Max Verstappen will start from 7th with Liam Lawson in 8th. Is this a disappointing result from Max Verstappen? Is this a disappointing result from Red Bull? Personally, I would say so.
Yeah, it has to be. And it has to be not because it's particularly uncharacteristic of this season. They've been a bit all over the place this season, up and down, good and bad races. But I think if you just take today as an example, I think there was a little bit more pace in that car, particularly in the hands of Max Verstappen. I don't think he would have challenged the front row particularly, but I do think he could have possibly got closer to the second row. We saw signs of it in the earlier stages of qualifying. Possibly you could look at the fact that they did 2 tyre preparation laps at the start of the last part of qualifying. There was this threat of rain coming, and it did eventually come, just a little bit, nowhere near as intense as we thought, but I think the circuit lost a little bit of its performance as the session went on, and Max Verstappen chose to do 2 preparation laps, which meant his flying lap came just a little bit later than everyone else who set their fastest times in the beginning of the session. So possibly they'll look at that and say maybe we could have played it differently, but we're talking fine margins, and the bottom line is the Red Bull at the moment around this circuit this weekend is just not a match for Mercedes, probably, or McLaren.
I'd say we've both done quite well here to talk through almost all of the top 10. That is your top 8 for the starting grid for tomorrow. We get ready for the race. But just as a last pointer, Mark, was there anyone or anything that's caught your eye out of qualifying that we need to keep an eye on heading into tomorrow?
I think there was a big upgrade for Alpine on the car. It was only on Gasly's car, and that was showing real signs of promise. So massively disappointing for him not to get into the final part of qualifying today. I think they'll be disappointed. I think Honda, there was a huge amount of intrigue at Aston Martin about this second phase of their big upgrade package. There was a massive chunk that they brought to the Hungaroring just before the summer break. Of course, this was a car that started the season dismally, so far off the pace it was almost embarrassing. And so they were waiting for this big upgrade. The upgrade they bought to Hungary actually did bring a fair chunk of performance on the chassis side. They were then waiting for this major step in power unit performance from Honda. This was where it came. It was bringing it to Zandvoort. and it's been a bit underwhelming. I think there are signs of promise. We saw some glimmers of hope from Fernando Alonso, but I think it's less about the overall horsepower, more about the drivability, the way the drivers and teams can harvest and deploy their energy. I don't think they got that quite right. We've seen Lance Stroll be pretty brutal in his comments about the level of performance it's brought. Not good enough, he says. So I think hopefully more to come from them. Positive signs from Audi, I think, over the weekend, certainly in the hands of Gabriel Bortoleto. Glimmers of performance from Nico Hülkenberg, but Bortoleto getting himself inside the top 10. Really good result today. Yeah,
looking strong are the Audi team and Bortoleto as well. Now, Mark, I know you want to get home, and I said that was going to be the last point, but you hated when I did this in qualifying, so I have to do it again. Final predictions heading into the race tomorrow.
I think it's going to be Kimi Antonelli from third, which is a big call. I don't think it's going to be Lando Norris, which will upset McLaren fans, and I'm one of those. I'd love to see him do well, but I don't think he's got the car underneath him for the Grand Prix victory. I think it's going to be a Mercedes driver. And for some reason, I just think Kimi's going to do it.
I can agree with you on the point of it being a Mercedes driver, but he has the backing. He's in the mental state right now. He has that winning mentality, and he's got the momentum. I think that George Russell can get it done on Grand Prix Sunday tomorrow. Mark, thank you very much for joining me once again. We will get ready for Lights Out tomorrow at 2 p.m, where the race will happen. And after 72 laps, we can finally find out if our predictions are correct or we were horribly wrong. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.